if you go into networking with the thought process or the idea of how can I extract value from this or how is this going to pay off for me, you will never have a valued network because everybody will sense that from a mile away. When you're a small early stage company, you have all innovation, no process. And when you're a large corporation, you have all process, no innovation. And when you go to that mid market, you're either a little bit more innovation than process or a little bit more process than innovation. And that's an area where you can come in and make a more significant impact. For me, it's trying to get to what is that story or are those outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Usually, the executive teams will have their top three or top four or top five initiatives. I try to look at those initiatives through the lens of the executive that I'm working with. And so maybe it is that we want to grow market share within our various regions, but I'm working with the COO. So we're trying to make operations more efficient in our current market so that when we apply this to a new market, we don't have a one-to-one fixed cost of the operations to the net new market. So that is how I will try to structure or identify like what are the outcomes we're trying to do, what is the lens that we're looking at it from the executive that I'm working with. And then from there, we start to break it down and say, okay, what would be the most value add initiatives or the value add use cases within this framework or within these outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And then we prioritize that based off of business impact, which is the ROI of the initiatives we're developing, and either feasibility or time to delivery. Eric Gonzalez. I am the founder and CEO of Omnificity, which is an executive advisory and fractional data leadership firm, and I'm excited to be with you here today.
I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and speak with me. I would like to first start talking about your career and the pivots and steps you've made along the way to get to where you are now, starting from all the way at the beginning.
Well, I was born in Pembroke Pines. No, we don't have to go that far back, but
You can if you want to.
no, so at the beginning of my career, I like to start from when I was getting into college at the University of Miami, what I majored in, and the path I took, which was I entered as an engineer, changed quickly to be a pre-med neuroscience major, thought I wanted to be a doctor, and then realized my junior year that that's not what I wanted to do. And I honestly just tried a lot of different things to figure out what it was that I wanted to do, which the first step was I was working as an intern at a commercial insurance brokerage firm. Then I worked as a software project manager for a digital signage firm. Then I thought I wanted to go teach English in China for a year to be able to travel and just explore the world and figure out what I wanted to do in my life. That fell through, came back home, applied to 250 jobs all over the US, and then I got my best offer at a revenue cycle management company that's based in Chicago. And that was my first foray into data. So I was a BI data analyst, little fish, big pond there. Um, my One of the most memorable projects for me was automating our reporting processes to the point that it was basically my full-time role, and I automated my entire role. So then somebody on my team left, and I ended up taking his position or all the responsibilities of his position over, and we didn't have to backfill. And
Well,
at that moment, I was like, there's something here with this whole data and automation thing. Um, and at the same time, I grew up not knowing what consulting was. Nobody in my family worked in consulting. I had never met a consultant. And I had a friend who was doing consulting with IBM, and he told me what it was. And I was like, it's very interesting because you're getting a lot of exposure to many different business problems, working with a variety of different stakeholders and teams and companies, and it just seems like it accelerates your career. And I had somebody who worked at the company that I was working at that recommended that I spend a week with this department and a week with that department, a week with that department, and I immediately put two and two together and said, seems like you're telling me to do consulting, at least internally, and I'm going to do this externally now. So went into healthcare consulting, grew there from individual contributor to people leader, realized that I loved data and I liked healthcare. So I wanted to deepen my technical acumen, not to be hands on keyboard, but just have a better understanding of how to adapt technical solutions to business problems. And so I started a master's program in computational data analytics from Georgia Tech, and then got recruited to a consulting firm that was more industry agnostic, but still data focused. And then from there, once I finished my master's, I got recruited to a bank that I was at for 3 years. And my final day was actually Friday. And now I'm building my own company and providing executive advisory and fractional
And
data leadership services to organizations.
going back to kind of like your intro to data, where you kind of got into consulting and data at the same time, how would you differentiate the consulting role, even when you are working as a data person, versus just a data person that exists within a team? Like, what are the key distinctions?
Well, every consulting project is different. So there's some companies where you really do feel like you're a part of the team and it's almost like staff augmentation. There's some companies where you are building this like product or solution that's off to the side. You develop it in 3 to 6 months, you hand it off to the team, and it's kind of like you're working in this silo or like this almost like R&D pocket of the company for a brief period of time. Um, I would say that the difference between being a consultant and being an FTE is more around the idea that consultants are there to fix problems, assess problems, or develop strategies to solve for problems. Whereas when you're an FTE, you might be doing that, but you're also just managing, maintaining, and continuing either the status quo or just like net new development, but there doesn't necessarily have to be a problem. And so you sometimes get that in consulting where it's like, hey, there's not really a problem here, but we're trying to develop a go forward approach or go forward strategy. So we want you to come in and help the management suite determine what we should do next. But I would say that's the biggest differentiation, aside from obviously like the ownership component of if you're a consultant, you usually have a less amount of accountability or ownership, or maybe no accountability or ownership for the final result or the start of a project. And when you're an FTE, you have that. Now, if you're an individual contributor versus you're a data leader, that is a whole different element, or at least the way that I think about being an individual contributor versus data leader. Individual contributors, or even it doesn't even have to be data related, but like if you're an individual contributor, you're focused on the tasks that people give to you, and as you get more senior, you learn when to say no, and you help prioritize, and you might manage like 20 to 30% of admin work compared to the like hands-on keyboard development work that you're doing. When you're a data leader or even an executive at a company, the focus shifts from, well, I need to be hands-on keyboard and doing work, to how do I think about my program or my department and how that fits into the larger scale operations across the entire organization. And I view data leaders or data leadership as a blend between operations and IT, or like the COO and the CIO. So there are all of these applications, systems, and processes that are the source points for all the data that are collected within a company. Then the middle layer of that is all of the either application development and software engineering to acquire that data, the data engineering to land that data within an environment, the data engineering slash analytics engineering to get it into more of a consumable format for analysts to utilize, and then analysts and data scientists being able to produce or build things from that middle layer that the engineers developed. And then the last point is connecting that to the business, and that final part is one of the most important in my view, because that's where either you get into endless development cycles around being an order taker, or you serve as a strategic partner to the business to say, we hear that this is the strategy or the operations that you want to deploy. Now let's investigate and see if that's a valid thing within the data. And if it is, then we'll double click into that and continue down that path. And if it's not, we need to find some new opportunities within our data set in order to develop or enhance operations. And so, as I think about the continuum of data, it's operations into information, into operations, back into operations or the information.
Yeah, so it would be like a cycle that informs itself and
Yes.
gets better over time. Cool. So now you're full time at Omnificity, your company,
Yep.
and I see that you do something called fractional leadership, which I'm actually not very familiar with. So what is that?
Yeah. So when I started building this company and thinking about how I wanted to develop it, my initial thought was, well, I'm gonna do some like freelance work and help people out on like a part-time basis when they need it. And I realized through iteration that where I excel and where this company needed to go was actually more of um, integrating with the executive teams and serving as that data leader, or at least advisor to the data leader, whether that was an actual CDO or a CIO, COO who owned data as a part of their portfolio, to really build out the blueprint or serve as a sounding board or develop or execute on a narrow scope of focus, which is where the fractional piece comes in. And so I'll work with companies from anywhere from like 5 to 20 hours a week traditionally to when it's more towards that 5 hours a week, it's like more having calls with the executive, reviewing some materials and artifacts, giving my advice. If it starts to scale up to 20 hours, I'm probably executing within the actual team, mentoring or coaching the junior analysts, helping with staffing or recruiting. And so it really is just like a part-time operator within the business. The reason for this or the benefit for this for companies is as a fractional leader, you are like at the lower end, less than the cost of a full time data analyst or data engineer on the team. And you're not coming in with the need for benefits or vacation or you're there to serve a purpose and at the same time be a part of the leadership team while not just building some like narrowly focused product, but you are focused on a more narrow scope and helping them extract value out of their data or their technology or whatever it is. I'm very bullish on not just fractional data leadership, but fractional leadership as a whole. And I see now there's fractional COOs, fractional CMOs, fractional CROs, fractional CDOs, fractional CIOs, and it really benefits companies who maybe need an interim leader to come in and help out for a leader that's just left, an interim leader because a portfolio got too large as a company scaled, so now they need to offload some of those components, but they don't want the overhead and cost of a full-time hire. Or in some cases, I've seen people do more of like a try before you buy on both sides. So I'm going to come in and work there for 10 to 15 hours. We're going to work on a narrow scope and we're going to see like, is this a good working relationship? Do I like you as a leadership team? Do you like me as an executive? And then we'll work something out after the fact. And so that strategically, I think is a huge benefit for a lot of companies and obviously for the leaders that are executing as well.
Cool. Yeah. I've never heard of fractional leadership. It sounds like you plug in at the management level and you can have a pretty big impact, and you're not really actually necessarily coding yourself or getting your hands on the keyboard, like you said, but you're more kind of just managing the team and getting it to perform better, and kind of along those lines, making higher up decisions and then communicating with other executives to let them know how things are going.
Yeah, that would be the bulk of the work. There are times where you're doing development. I mean, I don't think any data or technology leader fully gets away from doing some development or at least some debugging or working with the team on the development cycles. But it also just depends on the client. There's some clients that you're working with that are small, mid-sized companies or early stage startups that people naturally wear a lot of different hats. And so when you're a fractional operator in that business, you are going to wear a lot of different hats. When you're working with a either multi-state or multinational company that is a Fortune 100, Fortune 500, or would be if they were public, those types of companies, you have more of a process and leadership structure. And so those you more so are giving your insight, helping build out the strategy, doing more advisory work, and maybe not doing as much hands on keyboard because there likely is a team in place that is able to execute or operate. And then the other component too for me is partnering with operators or other teams that I can bring on to projects as well that will help me do some of the coding or do some of the infrastructure work or do some of the development work so that I'm continuing to work with and integrate with the executive team while leaning on and leveraging resources to do more of that traditional consulting or staff augmentation if the company needs that.
Would your ideal customer be kind of very large companies mostly? Because it sounds like fractional leadership is something that probably a term used by larger companies. Maybe it's like more known about in their circles. And like by using that term and branding yourself as fractional leadership, you probably from I th- I think maybe have an easier in, like they'll understand what it is you do and how you can help them?
I actually think that it's not a super small company or and not like a corporate behemoth, but it's more of that mid market. So like anywhere from 50 million to a billion in revenue is more of that sweet spot because when you're like either pre-revenue or at least a small early stage company, you probably don't have the requisite funds to go out and hire a fractional leader or a large leadership team, and so you're probably dealing with a small team that, like I said, wears a lot of different hats. And then as the company grows and you start to identify the different opportunities, then you start to round out that either management team or founding team to be able to build out and execute for the company. If you're a large corporation, a lot of times you want to have a full-time hire there because you're building out this portfolio or this program. And if you're a large enough corporation, you start having like divisional chief data officers and you have divisional CISOs and divisional COOs. There's some companies I've spoken to that have an enterprise executive team or global executive team, and then they will have regional or divisional chief executive officers, chief operating officers, chief financial officers, etc. And so to be fractional in that capacity is more challenging, I would say, because they're more so looking for that continuity and that stability of having a full-time resource in that role. Now, you might have more advisory positions that come in there, more of like that executive advisory. And when I think of executive advisory, I think of like having each position have its own personal board of advisors. So obviously the CEO traditionally works with the board and other people within the senior leadership team. But what if you had every member of the board having somebody there that they could relay information off of, serve as a sounding board? It's honestly similar to like what Gartner does with some of their executive partnership model, of having executive advisors there to help and coach their executives. But in that mid market, it's the sweet spot because you have this like when you're a small early stage company, you have all innovation, no process. And when you're a large corporation, you have all process, no innovation. And when you go to that mid market, you're either a little bit more innovation than process or a little bit more process than innovation. And that's an area where you can come in and make a more significant impact, wear several hats, not all of the hats, but be able to integrate and work with the leadership team. They have money to be able to afford bringing on additional help, but they don't maybe necessarily want to have a full-time hire because they're still trying to figure things out and they're still trying to figure out what that go forward approach is. And so that's where I've seen the biggest benefit because I've worked with companies that are, early stage or bootstrap startups, and I've worked with companies that are, very large. And the small companies just are trying to innovate and build a lot. The big companies are trying to like teach old dogs new tricks. So they're just trying to like unravel a lot of those bad habits so that they can innovate and build forward. Both have their pros and cons, but that's why I just think that the mid market is the place to be.
In term, one big issue about working as an entrepreneur with a business facing business is that the sales cycle can be long. How long would you say like a typical sales cycle is? Like how long it takes from the first time you meet someone to when they convert into a converting customer? Like how long would you say that cycle takes typically for you?
For me, I would say comfortably 6 months to a year, just because my way of selling is much more relationship driven. Like I'm trying to, as much as somebody's interviewing or trying to get to know me, I'm doing the same with them. And I need to work with leaders who have humility and are able to look in the mirror and understand that there are problems within their organization that they may or may not have had a hand in, but they're looking to fix and resolve those problems. And I will like try to ask questions that show me that they have humility and that they can admit to where they made a mistake because I read this one time and it's always stuck with me that data provide clarity, data do not provide answers. And I've worked with people that want you to find the good data or find the data that support their preconceived notions or foregone conclusions. And that's just not a good place to build a program. And that is just an environment where no data leader, no data person is going to thrive because we thrive off of finding information, doing hypothesis testing, and then continuing to iterate from there. And so, as I'm working with leaders and getting to know them and building that relationship, a lot of it is me trying to vet like, is this somebody who, when presented with new information, is going to change their strategy and change their mind? Because that's what is required in order to have a successful partnership. And so, because it is more in the executive advisory space and every project is different, it is a longer cycle than a traditional process because I am I'm more so trying to build a relationship with people, and then if eventually we can solve problems together, great. If I can connect them with somebody who's better suited for their problems, also amazing. But business is a long game, and I think that it's just key that you continue to interact with, network, and nourish your network, and like be more of a giver than a taker in terms of how you treat your network. And so that just ends up having longer cycles, but that's something that I love and I'm comfortable with.
That's awesome. I've definitely noticed that you implement a lot of what you're saying, I guess, in the way that you've interacted with me. So definitely comes through. Uh, the sales cycle for this sort of business can be pretty tough, especially when you're first starting out. Like landing your first client, it could take 6 months to a year, but it can be a lot of money. And I'm wondering, it sounds like you plug in to a system and then you come up with a new solution, like you solve a problem. Is it usually the case that you then go on to solve new problems at that existing company, or it's kind of like a one-time thing?
I would say it's more of the former. So it is more of a like long-term relationship of working with these companies because I'm traditional consulting is, hey, go build this product or solution, deliver it, and then you move on to the next piece of work. My strategy or like not even strategy, but just like my MO of working with people is like how do we solve problems and how do like the name of my business is Omnificity, which is omnific is like this all creating, and then ity as a suffix is the state of, so it's the state of all creating. And so I'm just trying to help organizations create as much opportunity as possible by developing and solving for solutions or problems within their organization, developing solutions for their problems in their organization. And so for me, it is just like, okay, we solved this one thing. Well, that one thing that we solve for, that just leads into another dependency that we have either upstream or downstream from that process. So now let's go tackle that and let's go work on that piece of the puzzle. The times where the projects where it's more of like a, hey, I'm going to help you develop this and then I'm going to roll off is more when I'm doing like advisory work for a chief data officer or a CIO where they like have a rough idea of where they're trying to go in a couple of years, but they just need to have more structure in terms of what does that 1, 3, 5 year roadmap look like from an organizational perspective, or from a like data solution or product perspective, or do an assessment of my current architecture and make some recommendations to me in terms of how we should be developing for the future. When it's more prescriptive like that, that's usually when it's like, okay, I got the information that I need, thank you, and then that'll be it for that engagement. But most of the time it is more integrating with these teams and just continuing to work on a variety of problems.
So a big part of this will be, I guess, at the end, showing what value you added, and that's like the way that you go about doing that. I would like to talk about, and then the other thing is pricing. How do you go about properly pricing so that you get properly compensated so you can keep running your business, and then at the same time charging something that's fair?
Yeah, well, so there's several ways that you can structure contracts in general with a service-based business. So one of them is time and material, so a flat hourly rate for how much you're charging. One of them is retainer, so you've probably heard that from like either the movies with lawyers or people in your family that might be a lawyer. One of them is fixed fee or project based. So again, build this for me, give me this artifact. I will give you $20,000 for this strategy and roadmap. And then the last one is more of like a shared risk agreement, which is like, hey, you've told me that you think this can generate like $1 million in revenue or cost savings for your business. I want 10% of whatever this generates over the course of 5 years, and here's how we measure it. Something to that effect. I started off doing more time and material because that was what I was familiar with. Where I'm more comfortable at is working on a retainer plus basis. So having a retainer in there because, you know, our time is valuable and we want to make sure that we reserve our time and that people are able to rely on us for 5, 10, 20 hours a week, whatever it is. And then if it's anything that's like egregious, which egregious to me is more defined as like anything over 10 to 20% of whatever your reserved hours are, then I'll charge it the time and material rate post that. So that's traditionally how I structure my contracts. I've begun. Oh, there's one other way you can structure it, which is it's kind of you can put it in one of these four buckets, but you can do like equity based contracts. So if you're working with like a early stage company, you can have like vested equity, or some people I know do like convertible notes. So that's just another way that you can structure deals, especially with like early stage companies or bootstrap companies or startups, in order to be part of the cap table. And I know some people that like exclusively do that and work with startups. But the like how it really just depends on like what your service offering is and like where you uh, where you find the most value in doing your deals. Like if you're really good at just like pumping out data migrations, you probably should do fixed fee. If you, like me, want to be more integrated with the executive team, probably retainer is a good option. If you like are working with a team and realize like, hey, we can make $20 million in revenue based off of this model that we deploy and build, and that $20 million in revenue hitting against EBITDA, you're trading at a 10x, so it's really going to be like a $200 million increase in valuation. Like that that is when you would structure probably more of a shared risk agreement to say like, hey, if we hit these different phase gates, this is how much will be paid out off of it, with maybe an upfront fee just to cover costs for the 6 months that I'm going to be working with you. So that is more or less how you can structure deals, and where I sit with that. Now, how I price it or how I've priced myself over time, the rule of thumb that I used starting out was whatever my W 2 rate was, which, if you're curious what your W 2 rate was at your previous job, remove the last three numbers on whatever your annual salary was, and then take that number and divide it by two. And so let's say your that salary was $100,000. You would make that 100, divide that by two, $50 an hour is your approximate rate as a W-2 employee. Because you're working and having to pay your own unemployment taxes, you have to pay for all of your taxes. You have to pay for your health insurance if you're by yourself, or maybe you have a spouse that you can be on their benefits. But regardless, like you don't have vacation, you don't have 401k, you don't have all of those ancillary benefits that are like a probably 30 to 40% bump on your salary if you were to like take the total cost of you as an employee. You would tack that on, and I've seen the rule of thumb just be anywhere from 50 to 100% of whatever your hourly rate was as a W-2 becomes your rate as a contractor or as an advisor or a non-FTE. And so if you were $50 an hour in my example, you would be at $75 to $100 an hour approximately. Now, the benefit of doing this work is you're learning new skills, you're learning how to sell, you're learning how to deliver value and figure out like where it is the biggest impact that you can make. And so as you continue to work with more senior people and as you continue to work on more higher level initiatives, you maybe for one project, because you're just doing like a Tableau to Power BI migration, you're charging 75 an hour. But the next project, you're building out a roadmap for a CIO on how they should staff their organization. You're not going to be charging 75 to $100 an hour for that. And so that's just where you need to start evaluating like where are my strengths and where do I want to spend my time and how do I want to develop or deliver this work. And then just if for you or for anybody who's listening, like if you're curious as to what you should get paid for a certain thing, use the rule of thumb calculation I gave and go look at what the, like, if your client sponsors a CIO, if your client sponsors director of analytics, go look at the VP of IT for that industry in that state, what they would make at a salary level, and do that math that I said earlier, or go look at a senior manager of analytics, what the average salary is there, the high end of the salary band there, and then do that math off of that salary range, and that will give you a ballpark estimate of where you want to be.
That's awesome. I really appreciate how you gave such a comprehensive answer. You kind of gave a whole framework for how to figure out your pricing, even if your situation isn't exactly like yours or mine. So, awesome. And in terms of, I guess, communicating the value that you add for your projects, what are some ways that you do that?
Well, I think to start during that like process of getting to know somebody or working with an executive or stakeholder, it's like, what's the outcome you're trying to achieve? And everybody has OKRs, they have KPIs, they have all this like, I, it's like a museum of analytics that just sits there and people look at it and they all make their own interpretations from it. But it's like, what are we genuinely trying to achieve here? Because business is easy, execution is hard. So, from a business standpoint, companies are trying to do one of three things. They're trying to increase revenue, they're trying to decrease the amount of money that they spend, or they're trying to avoid spending it all. If you do those three things correctly, you will increase profit. If you increase profit as a private company, you're going to increase the valuation of your company. If you increase profit as a public company, you're going to increase the market cap of your company. It's just like that is the trite way of looking at business. And so for me, it's trying to get to what is that story or are those outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Usually, the executive teams will have their top three or top four or top five initiatives. I try to look at those initiatives through the lens of the executive that I'm working with. And so maybe it is that we want to grow market share within our various regions, but I'm working with the COO. So we're trying to make operations more efficient in our current market so that when we apply this to a new market, we don't have a one-to-one fixed cost of the operations to the net new market. So that is how I will try to structure or identify like what are the outcomes we're trying to do, what is the lens that we're looking at it from the executive that I'm working with, and then from there we start to break it down and say, okay, what would be the most value add initiatives or the value add use cases within this framework or within these outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And then we prioritize that based off of business impact, which is the ROI of the initiatives we're developing, and either feasibility or time to delivery. And so something I'll tell people that I work with is like, we can go as fast or slow as you want. If you say that we need to execute on this and it needs to be done by next week, we should hire 100 people. If you say we need to execute on this, but we need to finish it by 2028, maybe you can do 5 to 10 hours a week to get this done over the course of a 2+ year period. So it's identifying what is that North Star, what is the direction that we need to go in, translating that or modifying that through the lens of the executive or the client sponsor of the team that you're working with, and then prioritizing it based off of the business impact and effort, feasibility, time to delivery, whatever you want to call that, so that you capture the low-hanging or medium-hanging fruit that deliver the most business impact, so that that begins the snowball effect of why data are important and why the program you're building is valuable to the organization. And then once you get that, like I've had the first example I gave you of the first role that I worked in, automating reports that took me 30 minutes because it was pulling down SQL every time to export it into Excel, copying all the Excel like charts and putting that into a PowerPoint, and then shipping that off custom every single month for all the clients we were working with, to converting it to a Power BI report that you just download as a PDF, apply a macro, and it's done in 11 seconds. I was able to say, okay, because I replaced me, I saved the company 60K or one FTE's worth of time, and then I backfilled another resource. So it's like, what are you doing to save the company money, and how can you have the tangible results to prove that? Because then when you bring that to the company, then they go, okay, great, we want to invest in these 10 other areas.
Something that's really important for you is networking, and I guess that's like how you go about your whole sales process. I guess it's rooted in your networking process. So I'd love to hear more about your favorite methods of networking. If it's in-person conferences, like specifically, are there certain meetups or events that you found a lot of use from, or if it's writing online on LinkedIn or any sort of channel that has been really beneficial for you?
The most beneficial one for me personally has been in-person events, but everything you just mentioned helps. So writing on LinkedIn helped me become a better writer, which helped me become a better speaker. Writing on LinkedIn helped me get introduced to people who I otherwise wouldn't have met around the world, who have invited me to speak at events or invited me to speak on podcasts like this or invited me to go to like large scale industry events, which then I met people there that then invited me to another event or later became clients. And so it's all just like synergistic in how all of it comes together. And now that I've started publishing more video content, and so I had a basketball podcast several years ago with a friend that helped me become a better speaker online and just a better speaker in general. So the more that you can just put yourself out there, the more you can build community. And the more that you build community, the more that you figure out where are the areas that I want to have community or continue to build community, where are the areas that I thrive in, and where are the areas that I can really make an impact or, provide a lot of benefit. And so something that was an interesting finding for me was being a data person at my core. I thought going to predominantly data conferences would be like an area where I'd meet a lot of people, meet peers that I could work with, meet potential clients, or just learn a lot while at the same time imparting some knowledge, while at the same time building a book that I could work with. The first couple parts were true. The building a book, not that true, because all of those people are working on the same things that I'm working on. So it's like I met peers and I met people I could learn from, or I met peers that I could teach something to, or I met people where we had the same stories or similar stories in different environments. So it was like group therapy around data problems. But going to events where I was the only data person, so maybe that's an executive event that's more geared towards like operations, or going to an industry event that is all healthcare. Those were the areas where I was like, oh, I'm one of one or I'm one of 10 people here that have this skill set. So the learning lessons that I can provide for people, as well as the business acumen or the industry acumen that they could provide for me, that was at a much larger magnitude because we weren't working on the same problems. So it was like two puzzle pieces fitting together. So that's the biggest recommendation I have for people, whether it's you or people listening or people that I talk to, is like, yes, go to the events where there's other people like you because you're going to learn and you're going to create a network and you're going to find people who you can partner with on things, but go places or find areas where no one else is at that is like you, because you will stand out and you will learn a lot and you will be able to give a lot of knowledge to people and like show them why data are valuable for their business. Even if it's just in that conversation, you're able to give them something that now they can take back to their business and start using data the right way.
For me, that's a massive tip because it's actually something that I haven't really been thinking, haven't really been consciously, I guess, doing, is going to these events that have some sort of industry in common with me or some sort of professional relation besides data, so that I would be the only data person there. And it's a great way to put yourself in an environment where your actual customers could be. So that's a great piece of advice right there.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And that, the biggest thing, and you're learning this now, and like I'm learning this, I learn this every day. I don't think you stop learning this, is like the more you put yourself out there, the more that is just like going to pay dividends for you in the future. Like that, the whole network is your net worth thing, I think is a limited statement, because if you do not invest in your network and you just go to an industry event and then never go to another one, or you go to one and you meet a lot of people but you don't follow up with them, you don't have conversations like this, you don't keep that relationship alive, then you're net worth or your network is just going to flatline or it's going to work against you. And you don't want to be in a place where you need to build a network quickly in the same way that you don't want to get quick money or get rich quick. Like, that doesn't work out for anybody, and that is a gamble. If you slowly invest and build your network over time and have this community that you've built over time, even if you're not doing a bunch of personal branding in the public atmosphere and you're just doing industry events, having coffee chats, having Zoom discussions with people, your ability to like just maintain or like have a job or build a business or do whatever you want to do in life is 10 to 100x more than somebody who just like never goes to any of those things or goes to them but doesn't follow up with anybody. Another tip for you or for anybody is like when you started a client or you are new to a job, interview and meet with all of the executive team and all of the people within your department. Like, try to be the person that meets everybody within the first month or two. And you can do that whether you're in person or virtual. When I was virtual and I started a company, I would just meet somebody and we'd have a great conversation. I'm like, who are the top three most interesting people that you recommend that I talk to? And they would tell me, and then I would go meet those people, and then I would ask for those three people from there. So I'd have 9 people from the next three, and then 27 people from the next three, and then 81 people from the next three. And it was like that I just had this. And then you have overlap, obviously, because the same person is mentioned 10 times. But that's also a data point that then you can be like, oh, that person is very integral to operations here. That person is a great culture fit here that everybody loves. So, like, you, within a month or two, can be more known than people who've been there for 10 years. And like every business I've ever worked at, every company that I've ever worked for, all of the stories are the same. I met this person 10 years ago when we worked together at this company. Our kids used to play soccer together. Our wives used to work together. He managed me or I managed her some point in my career. And then, I started a company and they joined me. Like, that is always how leadership teams and senior leaders end up working together. It is never a random HR resume that is sent in from, ZipRecruiter that, oh, now you became the CIO. It is completely a relationship business, especially as you continue to climb within your career or you build businesses. And so network, and nourish your network. Like, I go into conversations wanting to understand like what hobbies you have, what your dog's name is, like what do you do? What do you like to do on the weekends or with your kids? Because I want to get past the facade of like, oh, I build dashboards or build data models or build reports. Like, I want to get to know Warren at the core of who you are, and I want to know what motivates you and excites you, and like that is just because like I want to build that relationship with you and get to know you as a person, not as your position or as your title or as your career, because it's very superficial.
I definitely recognize your effort to do that, and I would say that you're very skilled at this. And this is something that I've only started focusing on, like, probably the past year or so. And I remember, like, a year ago, I the phrase, like, your network is your net worth, like, it stood out to me because I didn't understand it, and I was trying to, like, calculate, like, how does it pay off? Like, how does it work? And now I'm realizing that you can't figure out how a network could be valuable or how building a network is valuable. You just have to do it, and then that's how you realize. You have to
Yeah,
put yourself there, and you have to keep doing it and show, I guess, give energy, and eventually it'll make sense. And I don't think there's anything I could say to someone who's not networking to make them understand why it's worth it. You just have to I think you just have to do it.
yeah. You will never be able to if you go into networking with the thought process or the idea of how can I extract value from this or how is this going to pay off for me, you will never have a valued network because everybody will sense that from a mile away. If you go into it without the expectation of reciprocation and you just meet people and build relationships and just cultivate, nourish, and grow your network, you will always have a community that will support you.
I think it really it plays such a big role because you can't fake that, and you have to really be in aligned with what it is that you're building your network around. Like if you are just getting your next job and it's not really important to you, or you're not very career oriented, then you'll have a really hard time building a network around that because there's not a lot of energy there and people aren't going to be able to feed off of that or see value there. So I guess a big part from my perspective, I guess that I could add now that I'm thinking about it, is that you have to be very clear about what it is you want to build a network around in the first place, because that way you have a vision and you'll feel confident that like your efforts, whatever they are, they don't have to pay off right now because this is your life.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. So you've had that was a ton of really great advice from you. I really appreciate to hear about tips about networking. I think it's something that you do very well, uh, and that I admire a lot from you. So I did see you've mentioned to me before that you're kind of getting more into video, like short form video, like TikTok. I think that's interesting. Like, uh, I I'm also interested like in marketing, like overall your marketing funnel, and like what steps along the way your customer might take, and how you I guess go into building that and improving it.
I mean, that's something that's a work in progress. Like that, I would say sales and marketing are two completely different things, and I think that I'm better at sales than at marketing in general, and that's something that I'm continuing to develop. And like with LinkedIn and with me posting on LinkedIn or me doing video content, it is from that same place of like I'm just trying to give insight or give advice. I'm not trying to be like, you know, I am the best advisor who has ever lived, so please come work with me. It's just here is my message. Does this resonate with anybody? What are your opinions or what are your thoughts off of my message? And if that resonates with you, then great, I'd love to hear why. If it doesn't, I'd also love to hear why. And if we can, like, if there's a problem that I can solve for you that you recognize based off of advice that I'm giving generally or some story that I have, then that could be something interesting for us to work out down the road. So the marketing funnel piece or you know developing that ecosystem is something I'm really excited to continue to develop and deploy here as I continue with entrepreneurship.
Definitely, yeah. Especially as you're doing this full time, I'm sure that you'll have a lot of energy and effort to place into this, so it'll develop quickly. Um, and plus, um, you're starting with a really great foundation as well. I guess there's a lot of people who already know about you. So as you I think, like you already have a lot of people that are somewhere along like the sales cycle that we talked about before, of like being like maybe they're 3 months in, maybe they're 6 months in already. Like you already have a big group of people there, I think. So, um, I think it's looking good for you.
Yeah, man, I'm excited, and I'm really excited for you as well. And like I said during our lunch together, I'd love to do the next one of these in person, and we'll have this um, in Miami. But no, this is great, man.
That sounds good. I saw that I guess you're making a podcast as well, and I guess this would be a good time to get into just everything that you're working on currently, so people know how they can reach you or work with you if they want to.
Yeah. So I'll fill you and everybody in, and then I gotta jump for another call here. But I'm working right now on relaunching my newsletter. So my newsletter is called Daytinuum. It's daytinuum.beehive.com, and that is the covering the full continuum of data, which is a play on the words there. I am going to be launching a podcast soon called Data Unfiltered, and so it's just like for me the again a play on words, but just a raw, unfiltered look on what working in data or and like adjacent to data is like. And so I'm going to be interviewing people from all walks of life, from executives to creators and everything in between. And then just going to be working on also like long form video content, as well as continuing to develop and deploy short form content on TikTok, YouTube, probably get into like Facebook and Snap and all the above. So for all the socials, it's EG Data Guy, including LinkedIn, which is where I would say I've been most consistent over the last several years. But a lot of exciting things that I'm working on.
All right. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. It's been really fun. I learned a ton, and just thank you.
Thank you, Warren. Appreciate you having me, and we will do this again soon.